Welcome to HFY Vanguar, where humans face the galaxy with courage. Let's begin today's story. Mark Holloway had never believed the world could grow quieter after Mona's death. Yet here he was, staring at the notice glowing on his holoscreen, while the city outside screamed with rage. Notice of alien placement 48 hours. The words blazed in harsh blue against the dim light of his apartment, letters so sharp they seemed carved into his eyelids even when he blinked. He rubbed his temple, trying to process, though his coffee had long gone cold beside the keyboard. The smell was bitter metallic, the sort of scent that lingered after too many sleepless nights. He muttered under his breath, "Damn it." The law had been debated for months, protested in every major city on Earth, whispered about in cafes, and screamed across news feeds. And now it was no longer a headline, no longer a talking point for politicians now. It was personal. The Galactic Alliance's grand experiment of forced integration had come knocking at his door, and it demanded he open it. Mark leaned back in his chair, dark hair, a tangled mess, stubble thick on his jaw. His eyes, once bright with conviction, now carried the hollow sheen of a man who had watched too much crumble. His apartment wasn't much better. Piles of old data pads cluttered every surface relics of the stories he once pursued as a journalist, the sort that had made enemies in powerful places. Now most sat untouched, collecting dust like gravestones for a career he'd buried 18 months ago. He heard the chants before he saw them. Rising through his window came the sound of thousands of voices, angry, desperate, fractured. He pushed himself up and crossed to the glass, peering down into the streets of New Chicago. Two rivers of humanity clashed below. On one side, traditionalists carried glowing banners marked with slogans like "Earth for Humans" and "Stop the Invasion." Their voices merged into an ugly roar, fists pumping the air with tribal fury. On the opposite curb stood the Unifier's teal armbands, catching the last shimmer of twilight, chanting for peace, for connection, for something greater than tribal borders. Hover cars screamed past overhead, their engines echoing the chaos below. A bottle flew. Glass shattered. Someone screamed. Mark flinched, the noise dragging him back to the present. He touched the hollow screen again, as if rereading the mandate would somehow make it vanish. But the letters remained merciless. A buzzing sound broke through the protest din. His comm unit lit up Tom Nelson's voice crackling through the static. "Mark, you seen this mess? Kinda hard to miss when it's right outside my damn window." Mark answered, eyes narrowing as riot police in sleek black armor began forming barricades below. "You get your notice yet?" Mark's jaw tightened. "Just now. 2 of them, apparently." Tom whistled. "Too damn, the authority must think you're a saint. Most of us only got 1. Ex-journalist Mark corrected sharply, "and I doubt my credentials had anything to do with it." There was a pause, heavy on the line. Both men knew the shadow hanging over Mark's words. Mona, Drake. The betrayal, the funeral, the silence afterward. "Listen," Tom said carefully, "just be careful, all right? Some of these aliens, they're not what they seem." Mark stared at his own reflection in the glass, a face haunted by ghosts. "Yeah," he muttered, "I'll keep that in mind." He killed the line before Tom could answer. For a long moment, he just stood there listening to the chants outside, to the clash of 2 worlds fighting for dominance. Then with a sigh that tasted like ash, he turned away. His cleaning drone whirred to life as he activated it for the first time in months. The little machine buzzed around, collecting coffee cups, stacking data pads, sweeping away dust. It almost felt like a mockery, his life once centered around truth and fire, now reduced to the quiet hum of domestic preparation for 2 alien house guests. Mark's hands stilled on a photo frame he had kept face down on his desk for 18 months. Against his better judgment, he flipped it over. Mona smiled up at him, dark curls catching sunlight, laughter caught mid-breath. She looked alive, whole, free. Beside her stood Drake Seuss, his old partner, his arm thrown casually around her shoulders as they both laughed at some forgotten joke. Mark's throat tightened. He slammed the frame down. Outside, the chants shifted, new slogans echoing. No alien overlords. No forced integration. The room felt smaller, suddenly the walls pressing in. A new message blinked on his comm unit, placement details confirmed. 2 Zenter females, Arrival scheduled 0900 hours tomorrow. Zenter, he muttered, calling up the species file. Sparse text scrolled by humanoid, purple-skinned, technologically advanced recent political upheaval. Sanitized. Empty. But Mark remembered the whispers from his days in investigative journalism, rumors of slavery, class warfare, corruption, hidden beneath shimmering cities. He could almost hear Mona's voice pushing him to dig deeper. Another line scrolled across his screen: failure to comply will result in immediate sanctions. Mark leaned back, rubbing his temples again. Tomorrow his carefully constructed isolation would end. Tomorrow he would have to face not just people again, but alien strangers carrying the weight of centuries of politics and prejudice. Sleep refused him that night. He spent hours pacing the length of his apartment, researching old reports, trying to stitch together fragments of truth about the Zenter. Nothing satisfied him. His eyes burned, his heart pounded, and every whisper of wind outside felt like another ghost at his window. At precisely 09:00, the door chimed. Mark straightened his shirt, his hands trembling despite himself. The door slid open. Two Alliance officers stood, flanking figures cloaked in gray. The taller officer spoke her name tag, catching the light. "Mr. Holloway, your assigned residence." The hoods fell back. Mark's prepared greeting died on his lips. They were striking. Both tall, both graceful, their purple skins shimmering as though alive in the morning light. One's expression was measured calm, her silver-violet eyes meeting his for a fleeting second before dropping away. The other's gaze burned with defiance, lips curled in a smirk that carried no warmth. "I am Ira," said the calmer one, voice lilting, musical. She gestured slightly toward her companion. "This is my sister Lena." Charmed, Lena drawled, tone dripping with irony as her eyes swept across the apartment like a predator sizing up new territory. The officer cleared her throat. "Standard integration period is 6 months minimum. All parties are required to." "We know the rules," Lena snapped. "No need to repeat the propaganda." The officer's jaw tightened, but she only nodded. "Very well. Mr. Holloway, you have our contact if issues arise." And then they were gone, leaving behind a silence that pressed harder than the protests outside. Mark studied them. Ira's features were delicate, ethereal, almost yet guarded, as if every breath she took was measured against invisible scars. Her plain gray dress did nothing to hide her beauty, but it was her eyes that caught him. Ancient, wounded eyes in the face of someone who should have been young. Lena dropped her bag on the couch with a thud. "Nice place, better than the last 3. "The last 3, Mark asked before he could stop himself. "Integration attempts," Lena replied with a bitter smile. "Turns out most humans don't appreciate our background," Lena Ira warned softly. Mark felt old instincts stir the journalist in him, catching the scent of a story. "What background is that?" "The kind that makes people uncomfortable," Lena said, sprawling deliberately across his couch. "But don't worry, we won't be here long enough for it to matter." Ira's voice cut through softer. "What my sister means is that we understand if our presence is unwelcome. The mandate is not always fair to hosts." Mark hesitated, then shook his head. "I'm not going to throw you out. Whatever your background is, this is your home now, for as long as you need it." Something flickered in Ira's eyes, surprise, maybe even hope, before the mask dropped back into place. "You are kind, Mr. Holloway," Mark, he corrected. "Mark," she repeated, and somehow the sound of his own name in her voice made his pulse quicken. Lena snorted. "Oh, he's curious, sister." "Careful. Remember what happened last time someone got too interested in our story." The room grew colder, as though the very air recoiled. Ira's hand moved to her collar unconsciously, brushing against a faint mark on her neck. Mark noticed curiosity sparking like dry tinder. He leaned forward slightly. "I used to be a journalist. I know when there's more to a story." "Used to be," Lena shot back. "What happened?" "Get too close to something dangerous." Mark tensed, Mona's face flashing behind his eyes, Drake's voice echoing in his ears. He swallowed. "Something like that." Ira's gaze softened, though her voice was low. "Then perhaps you understand why some stories are better left untold." Their eyes met. For a moment, it was like staring into a mirror of grief. His loss reflected in hers, her wounds resonating with his own. The connection sparked electric terrifying. Ira looked away first. Lena clapped her hands sharply. "Well, this is awkward. Where's my room? I need to wash off the stench of that processing center." Mark gestured down the hall, his throat dry. As they moved into the apartment, he realized one thing with certainty. His life had just become very, very complicated. Mark had once believed silence was safety. Now silence felt like a predator crouched in the corners of his apartment, waiting to pounce. The sisters moved through the rooms like storms in orbit, never colliding yet, never at peace. Lena claimed the couch as her throne, scattering strange devices and data pads across its cushions. She sprawled there with calculated indifference, boots propped on the armrest, eyes always half-lidded, but never truly at rest. Ira, by contrast, drifted like a shadow. She cooked quietly, folded her bedding neatly in the spare room, and spoke only when addressed. Yet Mark caught her watching him, sometimes silver-violet eyes flicking toward him in unguarded moments, gaze sharp enough to pierce steel before she looked away. For the first 2 days, Mark told himself it was manageable. He kept his distance, buried himself in research, and let the cleaning drone bear the brunt of domestic order. But the protests outside grew louder each night. The city was unraveling thread by thread, and his apartment had become a pressure chamber where silence pressed harder than noise. On the third evening, Mark stood at the stove attempting something that resembled a meal. The kitchen smelled of onions burning too fast, of oil, spitting angrily in a pan. He muttered curses under his breath. "You cook?" The voice was soft, lilting. He turned, knife still in hand. Ira stood in the doorway wearing a simple gray shift. The apartment's light made her skin shimmer faintly, as if dusted with starlight. "Someone has to," Mark said, gesturing at the pan. "Unless you two brought a chef with you." Her lips curved something not quite a smile. On Zenter, food preparation was automated, efficient. A pause, and then her voice thinned. "Unless you were lower caste, then you cooked by hand, for others." Mark's hand froze. He studied her trembling fingers as she reached for the knife he offered. "And which were you?" For the first time, her eyes met his and did not look away. "Neither," she whispered. "I was property." The words hit like a gut punch. Before Mark could speak, Lena's voice cut across the room like a blade. "Really, sister? Already sharing our tragic backstory?" Ira stiffened, shutters slamming behind her eyes. "I was merely explaining." "You were getting comfortable," Lena snapped, stepping into the doorway. Her smirk was sharp, but her eyes burned with something harsher. Fear, maybe, or fury. "Remember what happens when we get comfortable." Mark slammed the knife down on the counter. "Hey, enough!" His voice carried a journalist's old authority, the tone that once silenced crooked politicians mid-sentence. "This is your home now. You don't have to posture like prisoners." Home, Lena laughed, bitter as acid. "This is a cage with nicer bars. Don't fool yourself." As if on cue, the shouts from the street rose again. No alien overlords, no forced integration. Someone hurled a brick. Glass shattered far below. Sirens wailed. "They fear what they don't understand," Mark said quietly. "No," Lena countered. "They fear exactly what they understand, that the galaxy is bigger and darker than they ever dreamed. And we carry proof of it in our skin." The knife slipped in Ira's hand. She gasped as a line of dark purple welled across her finger. Mark's instincts overrode hesitation. He reached for her hand. "Let me see." She jerked away. "I'm fine." But her voice shook, trembling like her fingers. He kept his tone professional, gentle. "I've seen worse. Trust me." For a long moment she hesitated, then surrendered her hand. The cut was shallow, but when he cleaned it, Mark noticed other scars running across her wrist. Thin, deliberate, too regular to be accidents. His jaw clenched, but he said nothing, wrapping the wound with care. "You have a gentle touch," Ira murmured. "For someone who claims to expose ugly truths." "Used to expose them," he corrected softly. Their eyes locked again. Heat rose between them, not entirely comfortable. From the doorway, Lena's gaze narrowed. "Careful, Mr. Ex-journalist. Curiosity killed more than cats where we come from." Ira pulled her hand back, retreating into silence. Dinner that night was a quiet, brittle affair. Later, while Mark washed dishes, his comm unit buzzed. Tom's face flickered into view, pale and tense. "You need to see this," Tom said. A video feed filled the hollow display, protests spiraling out of control downtown. Buildings burning, riot lines collapsing, voices shouting for blood. "They're saying aliens are spies," Tom continued, gathering intel on Earth's defenses. "Traditionalists are demanding house searches." "Not happening." Mark cut in sharply, glancing toward the sisters' rooms. They're not going anywhere. Mark, listen. Something bigger's moving. My sources say. The feed blinked out, static. Mark stared at the frozen screen. Slowly he turned. Lena leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. A small device twirled lazily in her hand. You're blocking my calls now, he demanded. Protecting us all, she said, coolly slipping the jammer into her pocket. Listen carefully, Holloway. You seem decent rare enough. But people who get close to us, they vanish, or worse. Is that a threat? A warning. She stepped closer, eyes like sharpened glass. My sister is starting to trust you. That makes you dangerous. To us. To yourself. I can handle dangerous. She smiled without humor. Like you handled whatever made you quit journalism? Her words landed like a blow. His throat worked, but no answer came. Lena leaned in just enough to whisper, We all have ghosts, Mark. Don't let yours get tangled with ours. Then she turned and left him staring at his reflection in the dark window. That night he couldn't sleep. Old case files glowed on his screens, half-finished articles about corruption, missing persons, whispers of alien technology. He swore he'd buried this life. But now the story was living in his apartment, wearing gray dresses and scars, dropping bitter warnings in his kitchen. A soft sound made him turn. Ira stood in the doorway, clad in a simple sleep garment. In the dim light, her skin glowed faintly patterns beneath the surface like scattered constellations. You should be sleeping, she said. So should you. She drifted closer, eyes glancing over his screens. You're investigating us. Force of habit. He didn't bother denying it. This placement wasn't random, was it? Silence stretched. Then she whispered no. It wasn't. Mark's pulse quickened. Then why me? Ira stopped beside him so close he could see the faint ridges of the mark at her throat. Because you stopped asking questions when someone wanted you to. They thought you would do the same with us. And will I? Her silver eyes burned in the darkness, dangerous and magnetic. That depends, she murmured, on whether you have learned from your past mistakes or whether you're doomed to repeat them. Before he could respond, she was gone. The doorway stood empty, her presence lingering like the echo of a storm. Mark turned back to his screen, but his mind was elsewhere. The protests outside raged. His apartment hummed with secrets. And somewhere deep in his chest, something old and dangerous stirred. The journalist. The first brick arrived before sunrise. Mark woke to the sound of shattering glass, heart-hammering neural reflexes from years of covering riots kicking in. He stumbled into the kitchen, barefoot, half expecting intruders. Instead, he found Ira standing pale as ash among shards of ceramic scattered across the floor. A brick lay at her feet, wrapped in crumpled paper. Her hands shook as she bent to gather the fragments. I was making tea, I dropped. Mark stooped, quickly catching her wrist before she could cut herself. Don't, he said sharply. You'll slice your hands open. Her pulse fluttered against his fingers, rapid and terrified. For a moment, their eyes locked. He felt the tremor racing through her skin the way she trembled, despite her attempt at composure. Then Lena's voice cut the air like a knife. Well, isn't this cozy? She leaned in the doorway, arms folded, smirked tight but brittle. That makes 4 bricks this week. They're improving their aim. Mark released Ira slowly. She stepped back immediately, retreating behind her composure. He reached for the paper around the brick, flattening it against the counter. 2 words stared back at him in crude red spray paint alien scum. I'll talk to building security, he muttered, though the words rang hollow. Don't bother, Lena said flatly. She picked up the brick, examining its edges. Security are the ones telling traditionalists where we live. Her eyes flicked toward the window as sirens wailed in the distance. Smoke rose on the horizon, black against the violet dawn. Not everyone is against us, Iris said softly, though her voice carried little conviction. Lena's laugh was sharp, brittle. Tell that to the last 3 families who hosted us. Or should I say turned us in? Mark's calm buzzed, then a jolt that snapped the tension. He slapped it on. Tom's face appeared pale and frantic. Check the news, Mark. Now. The hollow screen flickered to life, bathing the room in harsh blue. On the steps of Seuss Industries headquarters, a familiar figure stood at a podium. His voice carried the same magnetic timbre that once convinced voters exposed corruption-inspired movements. Drake, Seuss. Mark's gut turned to ice. Today, Drake declared Marx a breakthrough in human-alien relations. With the unveiling of our new integration technology, we step into a future of unity and peace. Cheers rose from the carefully curated crowd behind him. Cameras swiveled to capture his perfect angles, the glimmer of sincerity in his eyes. He was older, sharper around the edges, but his charisma was undiminished. "Turn it off," Mark growled, but his hand froze when he caught Ira's expression. She wasn't just watching. She was staring at the device glowing faintly behind Drake's podium. Her silver violet eyes widened, lips parting in a soundless word. "That's Zenter," she whispered. "Ancient technology. It shouldn't even exist anymore." "What kind of tech?" Mark demanded. "The kind that doesn't promote understanding," Lena spat. "The kind that promotes control." On screen, Drake lifted the device. It pulsed with purple light, unnervingly similar to the faint glow Mark had seen in Ira's mark. The camera zoomed in, capturing the radiance reflected in Drake's eyes. "It will allow humans and aliens to truly know one another," Drake said, smile radiant. "To share thoughts, to bridge divides, a future without fear." The crowd roared, but Ira's hand had gone to her neck, pressing against the faint mark above her collar. She shook her head slowly, whispering, "He doesn't know what he's awakening." Mark turned to her sharply. "You know something about this." Before she could answer, Lena cut in tone razor-edged. "Don't! He's a journalist. Everything we say becomes a story." Ex-journalist Mark snapped automatically, but his mind was racing. The technology, the sister's sudden placement in his home, Drake's speech. None of this was coincidence. Another brick smashed through the living room window. This time the paper attached bore new words: "Drake Sues knows the truth." Lena cursed viciously in Zenter tongue. Mark picked up, the paper hands tight around the edges. What truth, he demanded. Ira's voice was barely a whisper. "That my mark is not just a brand, it is a key." The words dropped like a stone into the silence. They sat together that night in the dim glow of Mark's office, the city's protests rumbling below like a restless beast. Ira's hands trembled as she touched the mark at her throat. "It was meant to bind," she said, "a sign of ownership. But it is more. My bloodline carries genetic codes, old keys to ancient Zenter biotechnology, codes that can unlock and control." Mark's throat tightened. "Control what?" "People," Lena said bluntly. "Thoughts, memories, will." He looked between them, trying to reconcile the quiet dignity of Ira with the monstrous implications. "And Drake wants it." "Wants her," Lena corrected, eyes hard. "Wants the key, and he'll burn down the galaxy to get it." Mark leaned back, every nerve screaming. The past 18 months suddenly made horrible sense. Mona's frantic whispers about something big, her car crash with no body recovered, Drake's sudden disappearance into corporate shadows. "Mona knew," he said quietly. The sisters looked at him. She was investigating disappearances. People, humans, and aliens vanishing without trace. "She called me panicked, said she'd found something huge. Drake told me she was paranoid, that she was chasing ghosts." His voice cracked. "And then she died." "Only she didn't." "Not really." "What do you mean?" Ira asked softly. Mark shook his head, fighting tears. "There was no body, just wreckage. Drake handled everything. And I believed him." Silence pressed heavy. Then Lena said what he hadn't dared. "If Drake has her, if she's alive." Mark's jaw clenched. "Then we find her, and we end this." The next day, the Petersons knocked on his door. The elderly couple had always been kind in passing, offering polite smiles in the hallway. But now they stepped inside with urgency, accompanied by a young Zenter male whose skin was several shades darker than Ira's. "This is Cass," Mrs. Peterson said briskly. "A scientist, he's found something." The young alien bowed, eyes wide, when they landed on Ira and Lena. "By the ancestors, the rumors were true." Mark frowned. "What rumors?" Cass pulled a data crystal from his satchel, slotting it into Mark's holoscreen. A web of diagrams flickered to life schematics, energy signatures, designs unmistakably alien. "I analyzed the technology Suez Industries unveiled," Cass said. "It's based on forbidden Zenter designs, mind control devices from our third dynasty. But they're incomplete. To function, they require a living key." His gaze locked on Ira. Her hand rose to her shem. The mark glowed faintly in response, as though hearing its name. Mark felt his stomach drop. That's why you were enslaved, he realized aloud. Not just punishment, to hide who you really were. My sister Lena said fiercely stepping in front of Ira is more than her bloodline. But that's why Drake wants her cast pressed. Without a keeper's genetic code, the technology is unstable, dangerous. But with her, he could bind minds by the millions. Mrs. Peterson laid a gentle hand on Mark's arm. Dear, is this connected to Mona? The room stilled. Mark stared at her. What do you know about Mona? Only what we've seen, she said softly. The facility where she vanished, it's visible from our apartment. Strange lights at night, unmarked vehicles, and sometimes she shuddered, screaming. Mr. Peterson wrapped an arm around his wife. We reported it. No one listened. Show me, Mark demanded. From the Petersons' corner unit, the view stretched across the industrial district. Cass adjusted an enhanced viewer, passing it to Mark. Through the shimmer of cloaking fields, he saw the building, tall, sterile, shimmering faintly. But it was the figures moving on the roof that froze him. One of them was unmistakable. Drake. Mark lowered the viewer, pulse racing. He's there now, he said, voice low. Testing his tech, Lena muttered grimly. No, Ira whispered, horror on her face. Not testing, preparing. Those signals, her voice broke. They're the same as the breeding farms, where they broke slaves' minds until nothing remained. Her shoulders shook. Without thinking, Mark pulled her into his arms. She stiffened, then melted against him, trembling. We have to stop him, she whispered into his chest. We will, he promised. His voice shook, but his resolve was steel. We'll get Mona. We'll bring him down. The Petersons exchanged a glance. Cass leaned forward, urgency in his tone. We have allies, a network of humans and aliens working together, sharing information. The true integration, not Drake's illusion. If we work together, we can expose him. Mark looked down at Ira, felt her silver eyes meet his. He thought of Mona, a betrayal of loss, and of the chance to finally make it mean something. We'll need a plan, he said. Good thing you've got a strategist. Lena smirked, though her eyes glimmered with something harsher than humor. Mark stood at the window that night, watching Drake's facility gleam like a spider's web in the distance. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about truth, about Mona, about Ira, and about ending the monster who had once been his closest friend. The Petersons' apartment didn't look like the headquarters of an underground resistance. It smelled faintly of lavender tea and polished wood. Knitted blankets hung over the couch, and ceramic figurines lined the shelves in neat rows. But beneath that domestic calm, secrets pulsed like a second heartbeat. Cass moved quickly, pulling out another data crystal, slotting it into the holoprojector on the Petersons' table. The elderly couple cleared away cups of tea without a word, as though hosting clandestine meetings were as natural as playing bridge on a Sunday afternoon. Light filled the room, blue and violet diagrams, spiraling outward schematics of Drake's facility, intercepted comms energy readings that made Mark's skin crawl. This isn't just research, Cass said. His voice carried the urgency of someone too young to have seen war, but old enough to know its weight. He's building a control hub, a neural lattice designed to synchronize thousands, maybe millions of minds at once. Mark frowned, and he's using Ira's genetic key to stabilize it. Cass nodded grimly. The mark on her neck isn't just symbolic, it's a resonance point. Her body carries the code. Without her, the system burns itself out. With her, he gestured at the glowing schematics. It becomes permanent. Mark's throat tightened. He looked at Ira, who sat rigid in her chair, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her silver violet eyes were fixed on the projection, but the faint tremor in her shoulders betrayed her composure. It was supposed to stay buried, she whispered. Our dynasty built wonders, but the cost was enslavement of billions. When the empire fell, we swore to erase it. But men like Drake always find what should remain forgotten. Mark leaned forward. And Mona, where does she fit in? Silence fell. Cass exchanged a glance with the Petersons, then back to Ira. It was Lena who broke it, her voice flat. She's alive, after a fashion. Mark's chest constricted. What the hell does that mean? Lena's eyes softened, the sharpness blunted by something like pity. Drake couldn't kill her. Not when she got too close to his plans. He used her as his first test subject. The room tilted. Mark gripped the edge of the table. No, his voice cracked. Yes, Lena said quietly. Without a keeper's code, the tech burned her mind. Her body still breathes, but what's left inside? She trailed off, shaking her head. Mark staggered back, breath ragged. Mona reduced to a shell, a breathing experiment. Rage clawed up his throat, mingling with grief. "I'll kill him," he swore. A warm hand touched his arm. Ira's, her gaze met his steady despite the shimmer of tears. "Not like this. If you charge blind, you'll die. She'll die. Everyone will." Mark swallowed hard, forcing his fury into something sharper. "Then we do it right. We get proof. Evidence that will stand up to the Alliance." Mrs. Peterson poured fresh tea with trembling hands. "Dear, you can't imagine how many of us are watching. Humans, aliens, families who lost loved ones. Drake thinks he controls the narrative, but truth spreads faster than fear." Cass leaned closer. "We've already mapped half the facility's security grid, but the inner levels where Mona's being kept, where the control hub is, those are locked. We'll need Lena's access." Mark turned sharply. "What access?" Lena smirked, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Did you think I spent the last year lounging on sofas? I worked for him, Holloway. Briefly, long enough to learn his codes, long enough to betray him before he betrayed me." Mark stared. The urge to lash out warred with the need for her knowledge. Finally, he said, "You should have told me, and you would have trusted me." Her tone was mocking, but her gaze flickered guilt in the cracks. "I made a choice, my sister's life for my silence. I regret nothing except being too late." Ira flinched at the words but said nothing. Mark's hands tightened into fists. "So you've been feeding him information?" "Yes. And no." Lena's smile was razor thin. "Enough to keep him thinking I was loyal. But I fed him what he wanted to hear, not what was true. And while he gloated, I mapped his fortress." She tapped the hollow screen, and new layers unfolded. Corridors, labs, sealed chambers glowing with warning symbols. "There." She pointed to a circular chamber at the core. "That's where he keeps the hub. And Mona." Mark's pulse thundered in his ears. The image looked like a spider's lair, all threads leading to the center. Cass adjusted the projection, showing patterns of purple energy pulsing outward. "He's scheduled a demonstration at the Alliance Summit, but the energy surge is building faster than he predicted. He may activate it early." "How long?" Ira asked, her voice low. "Days, maybe less." They worked late into the night. Plans whispered over tea and data pads, strategies drawn and redrawn. The Petersons' small apartment transformed into a war room, maps on walls, energy readings scrawled on paper, Cass's crystals littering the table. Mark watched Ira move among them, quiet but sharp, her gaze scanning every detail. She wasn't just a symbol or a victim. She was a strategist in her own right, the weight of her people's history etched into her every word. At one point, he caught her alone by the window. She stared at the distant shimmer of the facility, one hand absently tracing the mark at her throat. "You shouldn't carry this alone," he said softly. She didn't turn. "It was given to me at birth. Alone is all I've ever known. Not anymore." When she finally glanced at him, something fragile flickered in her eyes. Hope, fear, both at once. 2 nights later, they tested the infiltration plan. Lena guided them through intercepted patrol schedules. Cass demonstrated a jammer strong enough to disrupt Drake's sensors, and the Petersons revealed hidden tunnels beneath the district old smuggling routes from the pre-alliance days. But trust was a fragile thing. Mark awoke near dawn to find Lena standing in his office, one of his old case files in her hands. "You stopped digging," she said, voice unreadable. "Why?" He sat heavily, rubbing his eyes. "Because the last time I didn't, Mona died. Or lived just enough to suffer," Lena said coldly. She dropped the file on his desk. "You blame Drake. Good. But part of that blood is on you. You stopped when she begged you to keep going." Mark's jaw clenched. "And what about you? Feeding him lies while he built this nightmare." Her smirk was humorless. "Difference is I'm still fighting. You're just learning how again." Before he could answer, Ira appeared in the doorway, eyes sharp. "Enough. This bickering serves no one." Lena turned to leave but paused at the door. "He needs to know. If we fail, he'll be the one carrying her out." Mark stiffened, carrying Hoot. Lena's eyes softened just for a heartbeat. Mona, or what's left of her. Then she was gone. That evening, Cass brought new data. His scanners had detected faint resonance waves emanating from the facility waves synced to Ira's mark. "They're testing the connection," he said grimly. reaching for her across the city. If he activates the hub at full power, he could bind her from here. Ira's skin glowed faintly in the dim light, the mark pulsing like a heartbeat. She pressed a hand against it, shivering. Mark stepped closer, steadying her with a hand on her shoulder. Then we move now. Lena nodded. Tomorrow night, before the summit, before he has the chance to tighten the net. As plans solidified, Mark found himself drawn deeper into the Petersons' network. Messages flickered across encrypted channels, humans and aliens exchanging intelligence, coordinating protests, hiding fugitives. It was fragile, messy, imperfect. But it was real integration. Not Drake's forced unity, not the Alliance's mandates. Hope born from choice. Mark realized with a jolt that this ragtag network of neighbors and strangers was the story he had been chasing his entire career. Not corruption, not betrayal, but people daring to trust across divides. And if it cost him his life to protect it, so be it. The night before the mission, Mark stood alone on his balcony, the city a storm of neon and smoke beneath him. A soft presence moved beside him. Ira, her silver eyes reflected the chaos below. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Regret what?" "Opening the door to us." Mark's laugh was hollow. "Regret isn't the word, more like inevitability." He looked at her. "This was always coming, with or without me." She tilted her head, studying him. "And yet you choose to stand in it. Someone has to." For a moment, the distance between them vanished. Her hand brushed his tentative, like a question. His fingers closed around hers without thought. The mark at her throat pulsed softly in rhythm with his heartbeat. Tomorrow they would walk into fire. Tonight they let themselves feel human. The storm broke on the night they moved. Rain lashed New Chicago's steel canyons, thunder rolling across the skyline like artillery. The protests had burned themselves out hours earlier, leaving smoldering wreckage and a tense, brittle silence. It was the kind of silence Mark knew too well, calm before collapse. The Petersons' tunnels smelled of damp stone and rusted iron. They had once ferried smugglers and contraband beneath the city's industrial district, but now they carried something far more dangerous: hope. Mark adjusted the strap of his neural disruptor, every step heavy with memory. Mona had walked these streets, once chasing stories no one else dared. And now he followed her ghost into the jaws of the monster who had stolen her away. Lena led the way, her movements precise, her eyes scanning every shadow. Cass carried his scanner close, its faint beeping, the only sound besides dripping water. Ira walked beside Mark, her presence grounding him even as fear gnawed his insides. The faint glow of her mark pulsed with the same rhythm as the device Cass held. "They're already reaching for her," Cass muttered. "Resonance waves are stronger here. If Drake powers the hub before we cut him off, we won't let him," Mark said, sharper than intended. Ira touched his arm briefly, a silent tether. The facility loomed ahead, shimmering with cloaking fields that bent light like heat haze. Lena keyed a sequence into a handheld device. The shimmer flickered, then parted, revealing a towering structure of steel and alien alloy, its surface pulsing with faint purple veins. "Too easy," Mark muttered. "Of course it is," Lena replied grimly. "He's expecting us." They slipped inside. The quarters were unnervingly empty, lights casting sterile reflections across smooth walls. Security cameras tracked them, but none raised alarms. "He's watching," Ira whispered. "He wants us here." Mark tightened his grip on the disruptor. "Then let's not disappoint him." They passed labs lined with glass chambers. Inside, humans and aliens lay strapped to machines, neural bands pulsing with that same sickly purple light. Their eyes were open, but vacant bodies twitching in rhythm with unseen commands. Mark's stomach churned. He'd seen victims of brainwashing regimes before, but never like this. This was slavery perfected, thought stripped away, will burn to ash. Ira pressed a hand against the glass, her breath hitching. "This is what our dynasty did. This is why we swore to destroy it." Lena pulled her back sharply. "Don't look, we have work to do." But Mark looked. He forced himself to committing every detail to memory. If he survived, the galaxy would see this horror. The world would know. At last, they reached the elevator, descending to the core. The air grew colder, charged with static. Purple light seeped up through the seams in the floor, pulsing like a heartbeat. Mark's hand found Ira's again as the door slid open. The chamber inside was vast and circular, dominated by a towering central pillar of alien alloy. Energy coursed through it in violent surges, arcs of purple lightning leaping to the surrounding consoles. Suspended within that energy field hung a figure, Mona. Mark staggered forward, breath ripped from his lungs. She looked exactly as she had 18 months ago. Hair falling in dark curls, skin flawless, body preserved as though time itself had been arrested. But her eyes were empty, glassy, dead and alive all at once. Mona, he whispered. Welcome home, old friend. The voice came from behind, smooth, familiar, poison. Drake Sue stepped into view, clad in tailored black, threaded with faint silver circuitry. His smile was exactly as Mark remembered, warm, reasonable, irresistible. The smile that had once convinced a grieving city to trust them. Mark raised the disruptor fury boiling in his veins. What have you done? What you never had the courage to? Drake replied, stepping closer. I've built a future. A world without conflict, without fear. Look at her, Mark. Look at what I saved. Saved, Mark spat. You murdered her. Drake's expression cracked just for a heartbeat. I tried to save her. When she uncovered the truth, when she begged you to believe her, did you know? You turned away. I didn't. I gave her a chance. And now, once the process is perfected, I can bring her back. You're insane, Lena snarled. No, Drake said calmly. I'm a realist. Humanity cannot survive divided. Aliens cannot be trusted. But with this, he gestured at the pillar, at Mona's suspended body, at Ira trembling under the weight of his gaze. With this, we can unify everything. One voice, one will. He stepped toward Ira. And with you, my dear, I can perfect it. Mark moved instinctively, stepping between them. Don't touch her. Drake's eyes softened with something like pity. Still protecting others while you fail to protect yourself. Tell me, Mark, will you shoot me? Your old partner, the man who once stood beside you in every battle. You stopped being that man the moment you betrayed her, Earthstorm. For a moment, the chamber trembled with silence. Then Drake snapped his fingers. Guards emerged from the shadows, armored figures with weapons humming. Lena's curse split the air. It's a trap. Drake smiled. Of course it is. Chaos erupted. Mark fired the disruptor beams of blue slicing through the haze. Cass triggered his jammer lights flickering as alarms screamed. Lena launched herself into combat movements, vicious and precise, cutting down guards with a fury born of guilt. But the pillar roared louder, purple light flooding the chamber. Mona's body twitched violently, mouth opening in a soundless scream. Ira, Mark shouted. She clutched her throat, the mark blazing like fire. He's pulling me in. Drake's voice rose above the chaos, fever bright. Yes, the resonance completes the circuit. With you, we become whole. No, Ira cried. This technology was never meant to control. It was meant to connect. Her voice rang out, echoing against the chamber walls. She pressed her palm against the pillar. Light surged, shifting from violent purple to something softer, brighter connection instead of domination. Drake staggered back. No, that's not how it worked. Lena, Ira called, the resonance key. Lena ripped a small crystal from her boot, its glow harmonizing with Ira's mark. She sprinted toward the pillar, dodging fire, her body already seared by arcs of energy. Mark fought through guards' desperation, turning every strike lethal. He reached Mona's suspended body just as the energy field began to destabilize. Her lips moved, a whisper faint but clear. Mark, trust her. She's the key. Tears blurred his vision. I'm sorry, I should have believed you. Her glassy eyes softened just for a moment with the ghost of the woman he loved. Let me go. The field collapsed. Mona crumpled into his arms, light fading from her eyes. Her body was warm for a heartbeat, then still. Mark's cry tore through the chamber, raw and broken. Drake screamed, lunging for the controls. If I can't save her, I'll save everyone else. He slammed his palm against the console. Purple light exploded outward, racing through the city beyond. Mark could hear faint screams through the comms, thousands of voices crying as their minds were pulled into the net. No, Ira shouted, her mark blazing like a star. You don't understand. It's not control, it's connection. She pressed harder against the pillar, pouring everything into it. Lena, she cried. Her sister slammed the crystal into the console port. Energy surged coursing through her body. She screamed as silver streaks ripped across her purple skin, lightning etching scars into her flesh. Mark tried to reach her, but Ira held him back. "It has to be her," she sobbed. "It's the only way." Lena gasped, every muscle straining. "My redemption, remember." The crystal pulsed one final time. The pillar cracked, energy spiraling outward in a blinding wave. Mark shielded Ira as the chamber shook violently, consoles exploding. Drake's voice rose above the chaos, rage, grief, madness. He staggered toward Mona's lifeless body, eyes wild. "I could have saved you. I could have." The ceiling collapsed. Mark glimpsed his old friend one last time, smiling that warm, broken smile. "Take care of them, Mark. Better than I took care of her." Then the explosion swallowed him. Mark and Ira dragged Lena's unconscious body through collapsing corridors, Cass guiding them with frantic shouts. Flames roared, smoke choked the air. Alarms blared as the facility tore itself apart. They burst into the tunnels just as the final detonation ripped through the district. The ground shook, the night sky lit with violet fire. The control hub was gone. Drake was gone. Mona was gone. But Ira still clutched Mark's hand, her mark glowing softly against his palm. They had survived. For now. 3 days after the explosion, New Chicago still smelled of ash. The skyline bore scars where the facility had once loomed. Whole blocks lay in ruins, windows shattered, smoke drifting upward like the ghost of Drake's ambition. Yet amid the wreckage, life stirred. Crowds gathered in the streets, not to protest, but to embrace neighbors they had once feared. Humans and aliens walked side by side, their eyes cautious but alive with the first sparks of possibility. Mark sat in the hospital ward, staring at Lena's unconscious form. Silver streaks ran through her purple skin like veins of lightning, glowing faintly even at rest. Machines hummed softly around her, monitoring vitals that rose and fell with stubborn regularity. "She'll live," the doctor had told him, but the energy burned through her systems. She won't ever be the same. Mark hadn't known whether to weep or laugh. She was alive. Scarred, yes, but alive. A chance for redemption, for new beginnings. Beside him, Ira never moved. She held her sister's hand with both of hers, eyes fixed on Lena's face, as though willing her to wake. Her own mark glowed softly, responding to her sister's altered skin, as though the two now resonated together. "They're connected," Cass had murmured earlier, awe thick in his voice. The energy fused them. Whatever Lena became in that chamber, she's tethered to Ira now, not just by blood, by code. Mark wasn't sure what that meant, but as he watched the faint silver shimmer pulse in rhythm with Ira's mark, he realized it didn't matter. They had survived, and survival was a victory all its own. When Lena stirred at last, it was with a groan and a muttered curse. Mark leaned forward instantly. "Easy, you're safe." Her eyes fluttered open, silver glinting faintly in the violet. She winced, then smirked weakly. "If I sacrifice my stunning good looks for nothing, I'll be furious." Mark laughed, a real laugh, raw and unguarded. "The silver suits you. Very dramatic." "Everything about me is dramatic," Lena muttered. Her gaze flicked to Ira, who gripped her hand tighter. "Don't cry, sister. I'm not done tormenting you yet." Ira's tears spilled anyway, falling onto their joined hands. "You nearly killed yourself and saved the galaxy," Lena said hoarsely. "You're welcome." Her smile faltered as she looked at Mark. "Mona." Mark's chest tightened. He shook his head. "She's gone. Truly gone." For the first time, Lena's mask slipped. She whispered something in Zenter tongue, a prayer or a curse Mark couldn't tell. Then she closed her eyes. At least she's free now. Better than being Drake's ghost. The Alliance wasted no time seizing the moment. Delegates flooded into New Chicago, shaken by the near catastrophe, but quick to claim the narrative. Public broadcasts replayed shaky footage of the explosion, images of protesters and aliens alike helping each other in the aftermath. For once, fear gave way to solidarity. Mark sat in the Petersons' apartment as the summit's emergency session streamed across their holoscreen. "This forced integration experiment has failed," one delegate declared. "But out of its ashes, true connection may yet emerge." A new proposal followed: voluntary exchange programs, cultural networks, and the dismantling of Seuss industries. The Petersons beamed with pride, already organizing the first cultural exchange dinner from their living room, Cass enlisted as their star guest. Mark watched, arms folded, a cynical smile tugging at his lips. Politicians would polish the narrative, claim victories that weren't theirs. But the truth lived here in the small acts, the neighbors who chose trust over suspicion, the underground networks that risked everything, the young scientists who defied fear, the sisters who carried scars for everyone else's freedom. That was the real story. And for the first time in 18 months, Mark wrote again. Not about corruption, not about betrayal, but about people, about choice, about the difference between control and connection. His words spread quickly, amplified by Tom and his old network of journalists. Soon they weren't just Mark's story anymore, they were everyone's. 1 week later, Ira found him on the hospital roof. The garden there had been overgrown before the disaster, but now under volunteers' hands it bloomed again. Earth flowers mixed with zenter blossoms, violet stalks shimmering with faint bioluminescence, roses twining between alien stems. The mingled scents filled the evening air, strange yet harmonious. "You're writing again," she said softly. Mark closed the tablet in his lap, smiling faintly. "Yeah, guess I couldn't stay silent forever." She stepped closer, her skin glowing faintly in the twilight. The mark at her throat pulsed in rhythm with the silver streaks now running through her sister downstairs. "This world is changing," she murmured. "Because of you." "No," he said firmly. "Because of us. Because you chose to fight. Because you trusted me when you had no reason to." Her eyes shimmered, filled with emotions too complex for words. "You believed me when others would have turned away." Mark reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "Then stay. Not as a guest. Not because of a law. Stay because you want to." Her lips curved into a smile, radiant and fragile all at once. "Always." He pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. Their kiss was soft, but it carried all the weight of pain endured, trust rebuilt, and futures yet to be written. For the first time since Mona's death, Mark felt whole. The months that followed were not perfect. Prejudice lingered. Protests flared. Some still clung to fear, others to anger. But change spread like dawn. Exchange programs blossomed. Cass's team worked to salvage fragments of Zenter technology, reshaping it not into weapons, but into tools of understanding, devices that allowed voluntary sharing of thoughts, glimpses of perspective across species. The Petersons became unlikely celebrities, their cozy apartment a hub for interspecies gatherings. Lena, scars and all, launched a security consulting firm. Her silver-streaked skin turned into a badge of honor. She walked the streets with a swagger that dared anyone to call her broken. And Mark and Ira built something together, not just a home, but a story, one worth telling, one that belonged to everyone. A year later, the rooftop garden of Mark's apartment building bloomed with both earth and Zenter flowers. Guests filled the space, laughter mingling with music, as twilight painted the sky in purple and gold. Lena stood proudly at the front, silver streaks gleaming in the sunset. 1 year ago, she declared it to the crowd, "These two idiots helped change the world. They showed us unity doesn't come from force or fear, but from trust, from choosing love over hate." The crowd laughed, cheered. Mrs. Peterson dabbed at her eyes. Cass raised a glass in salute. Mark took Ira's hands, their vows, blending earth and Zenter traditions. When they kissed her, Mark pulsed softly, sending waves of light across the garden. For once, even Lena didn't make gagging noises, though she did mutter something about "finally." The night ended with dancing beneath alien starlight. Mark held Ira close, her laughter against his chest, her presence as steady as gravity. For the first time, he let himself imagine a future not defined by loss, but by hope. But the universe never sleeps. Far from New Chicago, in the shadows of a ruined district, a group of traditionalists sifted through rubble. Among the debris, they found a shard of violet alloy still pulsing faintly with residual energy. One man lifted it, eyes gleaming. "The key is not destroyed," he whispered, "only hidden." The others nodded, voices merging in a low chant. The war was not over.